Be Rich, a movement of generosity led by three simple words: give, serve, love.
Be Rich, a campaign that brings people, causes, and opportunity together.
Together, over 120,000 people
united under the banner of generosity with one simple goal:
To make
a difference.
a difference.
A difference.
To make a difference.
A difference, an impact, a change, a release of hope, joy, and light in our cities and around the globe. A difference for our friends, our neighbors, and those we will never meet.
A difference that can spark generational impact.
And making that difference simple.
Simple.
Simple?
Simple.
Simple.
Simple. In a complicated world, can making a difference really be simple?
During Be Rich, it is.
Because of you.
You want to make a difference, an immediate and tangible difference around you.
And as you are right now, you have all you need to do it.
Because you are here. We are here. And together, we're about to unleash a wave of generosity around the world led by three simple words: give, serve, love.
Are you ready? Are you ready?
Are you ready?
Are you ready?
Are you ready?
Are you ready? Well, greetings from Atlanta, Georgia, and welcome to Be Rich 2019. Today, your church is joining dozens of other churches launching our annual generosity campaign, Be Rich. Now, for you Be Rich veterans out there, welcome back. You've seen what God can do when we come together to give, serve, and love. You know the difference that we can make. And if you're new to Be Rich, we are so excited to have you as a part of this as well. You are in for a treat. Over the next few weeks, we're going to put the power of collective generosity to work. You see, your church is one of 80 churches across 20 states and 6 countries participating in this year's Be Rich campaign. More amazing than that, those churches are made up of, and this includes you, those churches are made up of 91,000 adults, 30,000 kids and students, which means that's over 121,000 people together who are giving and serving and loving our local communities and communities around the world. Now, one of the reasons we're so excited about today is that we know this works. We've seen the difference it makes. Today launches the 13th year of Be Rich, and over the past 12 years, there have been over 397,000 hours served and over $42 million given away. Now, those are big numbers, but each of those dollars was given and each of those hours was served by someone just like you. In fact, maybe it was you. It's inspiring to think about the impact that kind of generosity can have in our communities. And it's really inspiring when you know that you've had a part in the generosity. Now, if you're like most people, you want to make a difference, right? But you don't know how, or you're not sure how to do it. Not on your own anyway. I mean, knowing where to give, setting aside the money, knowing how to help, how to carve out the time, it's difficult. Even with the best of intentions, it's difficult to follow through and to know that your efforts mattered. That's where Be Rich comes in. Be Rich makes it simple for you to make a difference. And that's because over the last several months, your local church staff has been out vetting great projects with great nonprofit partners in your city. Your church leadership is ready for you to participate, and we want everyone to participate. In fact, that's our aim every year, 100% participation. And as always, 100% of the money you give will fund projects in your community. Now, how cool is that? 100% of the money is given away. In other words, we're asking 100% of you to give, and your church will give 100% of it away. Now, you may be wondering about the name, Be Rich. Why Be Rich? Well, we didn't come up with that on our own. We actually borrowed that from the Apostle Paul in a letter that he wrote to his pastor in training friend Timothy. He wrote these words. He said, "Command those who are rich in this present world to do good," and here's our phrase, "and to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and to be willing to share." So according to the Apostle Paul, rich people are to be rich in good deeds. They're to be generous with their money. They're to be willing to share their resources with the less resourced. That's why every year we dedicate this time to practice being rich together. But there's another reason we do Be Rich. As followers of Jesus, we're to follow Jesus. And Jesus was known for his compassion and his generosity. In fact, he was compassionate and generous to me, to you, to all of us. In light of that, we think that the church should be known for its compassion and its generosity. So a few weeks from now, we will all come back together and celebrate together the generosity and compassion that God has inspired in and through us collectively. But before that, I just want you to know this. I am so grateful that you have chosen to participate in this season of Be Rich. Thank you in advance for participating. Thank you in advance for what you're going to do for your local community. Now, at this time, I want to turn it over to your church leadership who will tell you more about Be Rich and the difference you're about to make in your local community.
Andy, thank you. Hey, I don't know about you guys, but the idea of being rich is it might come at different wavelengths for different people. And the beautiful thing I love about what we're about to jump into is we are about to walk into an opportunity for us as a church to leverage one of the dreams that I shared about last week. This idea that I long for a church where we are an essential part of the community. I long for a church where we are an essential part, where the movers and shakers in the community, they see us as the church not as individuals building our own kingdom, but as individuals who are genuinely leveraging who they are and what they have for the good in the community. And that's Be Rich. That is why we do what we do. Now, before we do any of that, I found that there's a problem. And to set the problem up, I'm going to just paint a picture for you. How many of you have ever gone home for lunch? You go home for lunch, maybe you're at home, or maybe you decide you've got an extended break and you drive home. This probably never happens to you. I'm just going to, full disclosure, this doesn't happen at our house. And so I don't want you to be like, oh my goodness, are you kidding me? This is all you have? But this happened to me many times when I was in college. Okay, we'll just preface that, all right? How many of you have gone home, you open up the pantry to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and you pull out the bread only to find this in your pantry? Anybody? Oh, good. Nelson, we're one and the same, my friend.
You just peel the green off.
You just... Rumor has it you can. Wouldn't... Anyway. The problem is we walk into our pantry and we see this moldy bread, and what we find is we're eager, we're excited, and all of a sudden we're just kind of underwhelmed, because what are we going to eat for lunch now? What is going to happen? Why did this happen? Well, the truth is, the reason that this happened, the reason that the bread was there, is because we held on to it too long. We didn't consume it fast enough. We had the resources we needed. We had the bread we wanted. We had everything we needed to make a great peanut butter and jelly sandwich and give me a side of Cheetos and a big glass of milk. The problem was we did not consume what we had fast enough. And what we're going to talk about today is this simple concept, this idea that what we get was meant to be leveraged and used. And many times what we have, we don't consume fast enough. And so we're left holding on to things that are just getting quite moldy. In fact, if you check out, you've already heard the pastor's going to be talking about money, and you're just sitting there thinking, okay, how long is he going to talk? Can we hurry up and finish? Here's what I want you to know, and this is the main point of today's message. And well, what I believe comes from the brother of Jesus, from James. And he's going to give us some wise words about what we should do with the things that are maybe in our pantry, but more importantly, with the things that we have. In fact, he would say this: you've got to start giving while you're living, because because what you're holding is molding. Start giving while you're living. Start giving while you're living. Start leveraging the things you have, because isn't it true, the things that we're holding, it's going to start molding if we just hold on to it. Start giving while you're living, because what you're holding is a molding. So where did we get this from? Well, James, who I said is the brother of Jesus, I mean, it's fascinating when you really begin to think about that Jesus had a brother, And not just any brother. He had a brother who did not want anything to do with his older brother because his older brother made claims that he was the Son of God, that he was going to be the Savior of the world. And hey, little bro, you should just follow after me. Who would want to follow in those footsteps? It's like, hurry up, get out of here. And then you hear a ploy that your older brother is going to be crucified. And this is this is just incredible because you're finally getting this brat who's older than you who keeps saying, I'm going to be your Lord, I'm going to be your Lord, I'm going to come back from the dead. And you probably in the back of your mind would be doing the same thing James would be saying. You'd be saying, show me, prove it. Go. Worst thing that happens is you're right. Best thing that happens is I don't have to deal with you the rest of my life, right? And then James, who basically saw his brother who died and came back to life, he decides that maybe following Jesus is worth it. And James, who saw the way Jesus treated people, who saw the way Jesus treated others, who saw what Jesus was all about, he wrote a book, and a letter, a journal, if you would, wise sayings that he gained from watching his brother living what it looks like to be a follower of Jesus. And James wrote in chapter 5, verse 1, and it says this, now listen, you rich people, which, let's be honest, I mean, you just hear that and you're thinking, well, that's not me. Are you kidding me? Like, I mean, I know Rich and I've seen Rich and they live north of 1709 and you're thinking, that's where we took our kids to go trick-or-treating was the neighborhood, right? That's not my reality, but isn't it true that when you see this word, we have this natural inclination to push back? And if we're going to be honest with ourselves, and in fact, when it comes to be rich, one of the things we want to encourage, and one of the things you hear us say every single year is while there's the natural pushback because we don't feel rich, the reality is that for you and I, for me, we are genuinely richer than we think. I mean, I remember as a fresh graduate of college, I was married and I had a wife that was a teacher and I was a part-time preacher. Let me just tell you, those two paychecks don't add up to a lot. And I remember looking at those two paychecks and thinking, wow, we are in the money, And I mean, those two paychecks are so far from reality. But I remember thinking in that moment, wow, we've made it, we've arrived. And you know what happened then? We started spending money. And you know what happened then? We started acquiring bills. And you know what happened then? Even though there were some raises from time to time, we began realizing that there's this pinch, there's this struggle, this frustration. Because for many of us, we don't feel rich because we don't have margin in our life. There's no financial margin when it comes to our livelihood. And so because of the lack of margin, we feel clamped, we feel frustrated, we feel like there's no wiggle room. And so there's no way you could even come to me and say that I'm rich because you don't know the bills I owe. You don't know what I have. And the other reason many of us don't feel rich is because most of us have an Instagram account and we see the perfect experience of everybody else. We see how everybody else spends their money. We see the vacations they go on. We see the cars they drive in and we think, if only. We look at this and we think, okay, James, this isn't talking to me, but by international standards, if we were to look at from an international perspective, the truth is, where we're running with is if your household income is $33,000 a year or more, you're in the 1% club. I mean, think about that. I mean, you just read that and nobody's like, woohoo, we arrived, right? Nobody's sitting there clapping because we made the 1% club. Because the truth is that even though we might be in the 1% club of the world, we still know our own reality. And we still look at what's going on in our world. We still look at what's happening and we realize that, man, I mean, it would be nice to have margin, but, and the truth is for millions of people in the world today, they would look at us, they would look at our problems and they would scoff at them and say, really, that's a problem? And we've got a cute title for it. It's first world problems, right? But when James was writing this, he was writing it into a culture where they perceived that if you were rich, if you were healthy, you were favored by God. James was writing this into a culture where if you had stuff, what it meant was that God's favor was upon you and you've done something right. But what I want to push and what I want to encourage and where I want to go is it's not about this idea that if you have something, you are something to God. Because I genuinely believe that regardless of what you have, you are something to God. But the truth is that Jesus brought in this new ethic that for us that have stuff, for us that would be considered in the 1% club, or if not the 1% club, we're pretty stinking close. The ethic that Jesus brought into place was not this idea that because I have stuff, that I am a blessing to other people. It was this, that because of what I have, he says that Jesus' new ethic says that rich people aren't more loved, which is what they were running at. Rather, rich people are more responsible, are more accountable. That there is something to the fact that because we have, that we are responsible to. There's something to the fact that because we have, we are accountable for. There's something to this idea that because I have a little, because I have something, I am responsible, I am accountable. Because of that, there is more opportunity. There's an expectation to give more, to love more, to serve more, to do more. And so James is writing, he's trying to parse apart this old covenant thinking where if I have, it's because God has blessed me. He's trying to get away from that reality and get into something brand new. And so he's trying to push them, and he goes back and he says, now you, listen, you rich people. And then he goes on, he says, you weep and you wail because of the miseries that are coming on you, which, okay, what does that even mean? You rich people, you weep and you wail because of the miseries that are coming on you. James is writing that to a culture where they trusted their stuff. They trusted their stuff, and because they trusted their stuff, they just thought, hey, I've got it all together. But isn't it true that just because we're rich, we still have worries? If I could tell you that, hey, if you were to get to this price point, you will never worry again, wouldn't we all be trying to get to that price point? If I were to tell you that, hey, all you've got to do is make $33,000 a year and you will never have a worry again, and y'all would probably roll your eyes and be like, that's not the case. Scott, you don't understand. And James is writing into that, and he's saying, hey, rich people, you weep and you wail because of the miseries that are coming on to you. And he continues on in verse 2, and he says this, he says, your wealth has rotted, and there's moths that have eaten your clothes. It's kind of awkward. And your gold and your silver, they're corroded. How do we put that into today's terms? How many of you have that drawer? You know that drawer that you open up, and maybe it has the last 3 models of iPhones. It probably has several batteries that are halfway used, but you're looking forward to using them again. It might even have a couple of remotes that if only we have the right battery and the right TV, we can maybe reuse this remote. How many of you have those things in that drawer? We've got this drawer of stuff, and we really don't know what to do with this stuff, but we don't want to get rid of this stuff because we're just thinking that maybe one day this stuff is going to come back in handy. And all the while, you're sitting there thinking, oh, great, a new iPhone's coming out. And what do we do? We're like, hey, I'm going to get last year's edition so that I'm not just like super current, but so I'm kind of current, right? And then we'll put whatever the old phone is. We've got this drawer of stuff. And what do we do with the stuff? And what James is telling us is we're accountable for what we have. In fact, the stuff that we have now, it's not good for anything. And it's not really good to anybody anymore because it's just sitting in a drawer, accumulating dust, maybe gaining cracks, maybe waiting for a little one to grow up so that he can just throw it on the ground. I don't know why, but for the most part, we have these drawers of stuff. And we live in this reality, we live in this idea that what comes in, we're excited, we're bringing stuff in, we're bringing stuff in, we're bringing stuff in, but what do we do with the stuff we bring in? We let it stack up. We get new stuff, we stack stuff up. We get new stuff, we stack stuff up. We get new stuff, what do? We get a new storage bin, another storage area. We get a new closet. Right? And this isn't meant to leverage guilt. This is James, who's looking at what we have, who's looking into a culture that is trying to make sense of life, trying to figure out how do we do with what we do, trying to push them away from thinking that just because you have things doesn't mean that you're automatically God's favored individuals, that because you have things, there's a responsibility that is on you, there's an accountability that is upon you. And so he continues on in verse 3. He says, their corrosion will testify against you. Oh, in other words, the day's going to come where the stuff that you have is going to speak against you. And you've probably been there. You've probably talked to somebody who either just passed on, or maybe they have just put their loved one in a nursing home or into a senior living center, and you're tasked with going through their stuff. And what do you say? Why did they have all of this stuff? What are they thinking? And what do? You go to your friends. You're like, you'll never believe what my mother had in her closet. She had every single thing from 1970. Like, she wasn't going to wear that. I mean, the corrosion will testify against you. The stuff that you have that's stacking up, it's going to testify against you. And he continues on. Their corrosion will testify against you, and those things will eat your flesh like fire. Now, I'm not saying that the clothes that you haven't worn since 1970 is going to eat your flesh like fire. Maybe it will. Don't put it on. Not because it will eat your flesh like fire, just don't put it on.
It's coming back.
Don't put it on. But James is speaking to a culture that believed in the judgment of God, that if I have, that God will do, and this judgment piece. And so James isn't necessarily saying that if you have your stuff, it's going to eat you up. But he's speaking into the idea that there was this judgment of God that was going to come upon us. And he's telling them that you are responsible. He's telling these individuals, yes, the corrosion of your stuff's going to testify. And let's just think about the fact that God is a just God. He is for you. And just because you have stuff doesn't mean you have God's favor. God is for everybody. So here's what I need you to know, is that what you have, you're accountable for. What you have, you are accountable for. What you have brought into this life, you're responsible for what you do with this. You see, James believed, regardless of where you stand, James believed that there was an afterlife. He believed that not everything in this world was about this world. He believed that there was something greater at stake, that there was something on the other side of this world, that there was something with which that you and I could be held accountable for. And the reason James believed that was because he saw his son, he saw his older brother overcome death. And when Jesus came back from the grave, he realized that everything Jesus said about an afterlife, about eternal life, it must be a reality because he overcame the grave himself. And so James began to live this out thinking, you know what, the stuff we have, it's just for a season. It's not going to be a big deal. It's just for a season. There's something greater. There's something on the other side that I'm accountable for, and I want to use my resources to such a degree that I am worthy of being called his, that God has found favor in the way I've leveraged the resources, in the way I have treated them, in the way I've helped other people. And he goes on in verse 3, you have hoarded wealth in the last days. Which, wouldn't it be nice if we could just kind of put that line up? Or maybe for many of us, we're like, well, we're not in the last days. I mean, I'm closing in on 40. I've got a lot of life ahead of me, right? Like, this is going to be okay. Like, I've got a lot of hoarding to do, and it's okay. But let me ask you a question. What James is writing to is he's writing to a group of people that they didn't know what their eventual fate was, but he's writing to a group of people that they believed that the more they had, the better they were. The more they had, the more God honored them. But let me ask you this, which this is what James is ultimately asking. Why do we hoard? Why hoard when your time is short? You ever thought about that? I mean, regardless of what you believe, regardless of whether you're a follower of Jesus or not, regardless of what belief structure you have, why is it that we tend to hoard the things we have when our time is so short? Why is it that we think we've got to have and have and have? And trust me, I'm not trying to come upon you with a microphone and say, this is what you need to do, because this is as much for me as it is for us. I've seen inside my shed. I know what our garage looks like. I know those closets. And Alden does everything she can to keep them clean, and I'm the one who's like, oh, you know what? I might wear that again. And it's in the back of my closet. I'm the one who says, you know what? We might need that. Like, I really might, if my phone were to break, I need to have a backup plan, so let's keep that in here. Don't let the boys touch it. There's something inside all of us that we can justify that. We can justify the reality. But like I said earlier, we've all been in those scenarios where we've had to clean up from somebody else. And what do? You laugh about what is there. You laugh about what they have. You laugh about where we're going and what this looks like. And so what James is trying to tell us is the reason we hoard, the reason that we do this is because we have put our trust in stuff. There's a mistake that we make when we gain things. And it's this mistake that we begin to leverage our trust in stuff instead of the person who richly blesses us. And I wish I could say, do as I say, not as I do. But the reality is, the more we acquire, the more we want to put our trust in stuff. We want to make sure we've got our 401ks. We want to make sure we have the college savings plans. And I'm not saying those are bad things. Don't hear me out. We want to make sure that we've got the latest and the greatest and have. And so what do? We begin to put our trust into stuff. And all of a sudden, my reality becomes how much is in the retirement. My reality becomes how much money is in my savings account. My reality is not in who Jesus richly blessed me for and with, but it is in what I have acquired. And don't get me wrong. We need to work hard. We need to leverage our resources. We need to do everything we can so that we can do things for other people. But at the end of the day, and James would agree with this, Jesus would say this of himself, and he'd say this of other people. He'd say that I am the manager, I am the owner of everything. And he would give parables that would talk about the followers of Jesus are stewards. They are managers of the wealth with which God blesses them with. And he would talk about this time and time again, this idea that as the owner of everything, we are responsible for how we steward, how we treat the resources with which we've been blessed with. And so one of the things that I think is valuable is we are commended for working hard. We are commended to work hard. We are commended to do everything we can to make an extra dollar. We are commended to do everything we can to fight for and to work hard and to bring in a good savings, to bring in a good wage. But the thing that Jesus commanded us to do is to be generous. We're commended to work hard. We're commanded to be generous. We're commended to work hard and to do everything we can to supply, but we're commanded as good stewards to be generous with what he's given us. And so James continues on in verse 4. As if we weren't paying attention already, he says, look, hey, genius, hey guys, look, the wages you failed to pay the workers who mowed the fields are crying against you. You see, in that day, the wages, he's talking to the business owners, he's talking to the individuals that own property. He's saying, hey, those guys that you had come and do your yard, the guys you had that came working for you, you didn't pay them well. In fact, you didn't just pay them well, you undermined them. You told them you were going to pay something and they had no discourse. They couldn't fight for themselves. So what happened? You gave them a couple dollars short, or you gave them just a few dollars and said, go on your merry way. He's saying, look, the wages you failed to pay the workers who mowed your fields are crying against you. They're crying against you. And he goes on and he says this, the cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord Almighty. In other words, and this is a great principle for us to think about, because many of us are probably in here, we're business owners, we're leaders, we have people that report to us from time to time. And this is just a great principle. What can be extracted from this reality is that resource people shouldn't look for loopholes to get by with doing less. James is looking at these field owners and saying, you're looking for loopholes to figure out how you don't have to pay the person that's working for you as much as they deserve. See, resource people shouldn't look for loopholes to get by with doing less. Rather, resource people should look for opportunities to do more. We as resource people, we should be looking for opportunities to help. We should be looking for opportunities to be that 8-year-old boy with a stash full of candy and an empty bucket and say, you know what, I want to help. I don't have much. I've got a couple Snickers, and I'm just going to give what I have, and I'm going to help you out. I'm going to give what I have, and I'm going to do whatever I can. You see, resource people, we look for opportunities to do more. And then James continues on in chapter 5. He continues on moving forward. He's telling us, he says, look, be careful. And he says, you have lived on earth in luxury and self-indulgence, which we're like, you don't know me, James. Like, just stop with this indulgence. Stop with this reality. And he says, you've lived on earth in luxury and self-indulgence. Basically, he's saying, you have fatted yourself in the day of slaughter. You've bought into the consumption assumption that basically whatever you receive is meant for your well-being. Whatever you receive is meant to be consumed by you. And he's looking at them and he's saying, you fattened yourself for the day of slaughter, which that doesn't mean a lot for us today. And here's why it doesn't mean a lot, because when we have Thanksgiving coming up, what do? You order a honey-baked ham. Oh no, there's more people coming. You get a second one. When it comes for a time of celebration, what do? We are able to get things on the fly. We're able to order. Now, I don't know that Amazon can send you a smoked turkey yet, but maybe one day, right? But in this day and age, what they would do is many of the individuals that the resource people, the people that they would have a separate bin that was just for that one calf, and they would feed that calf more. They would treat that calf better. They would do anything and everything they can to make that calf fat. Because they knew there was going to be a day whenever it was time to celebrate. They knew there was going to be a day when maybe the prodigal son would come home. They knew there was going to be a day whenever it was meant to be a party. And so they needed to have the calf ready. They were thinking way ahead. And so he's saying, you have fattened yourself up in the day of slaughter. And they're thinking, I get this. But I don't think they really got this. Because James, who would go on and he would encourage them and challenge them, but James was an individual that he didn't get to live and see this, but the people James was talking to, they lived this out. In fact, in 62 BC or 62 AD, James was illegally stoned. It was between governors, the Judean governors, that were between the two. And so in the process of one governor going out and one governor coming in, the high priest of the day was really frustrated with this fact that James kept claiming that he knew the brother of Jesus. He kept claiming that, hey, you know what? My brother is Jesus. He came back from the dead. We should just go with whatever he says because he is worth it. And so James eventually gets stoned by the high priest illegally. Josephus, who was a Jewish historian, made the documentation of this. And 7 years after 62, the entire Jewish nation, the Jews, got raided. And they had all of this stuff that they had gained. They had all the stuff that they had harvested. They had all the money and the gifts and things that they had just decided to put in their place. And when they got raided, you know what happened? Those who had the most lost the most. Many of them were killed. Some of them were shipped away into slavery. Many of them were just put aside and they were left with nothing at all. And so James is writing to these individuals and he's saying, you have fattened yourself up in the day of slaughter. And sure enough, I don't think that James was writing about that specific incident, but I think James knew that there was something inside of each one of us that we want to hold on to things. We want to leverage everything we can. We want to be our own savior. We want to put our trust in the things that we've earned rather than in the one who richly blesses us. So what do we do with this? Now, I want to encourage you because for many of us in here, this idea of what James is talking about, of being rich in love and good deeds, this idea of leveraging our stuff, my challenge is for many of us in here, is ultimately we don't want to be the fatted calf, but not to take it that way. The opposite side is this, is I want to encourage you to give while the giving's good. I want to encourage you to give, to be generous. Because ultimately, the stuff that we're acquiring is going to one day, it's going to be molded. What James said and what we started off with this idea is that we've got to start giving while you're living because what you're holding is a molding. And I know that's cute and a reality. And me as a pastor, I'm not saying all this to tell you, okay, so now here's what I want you to do. I want you to give me all your money. Because there's something valuable when we become generous that breaks the strings of greed in our life. We've got this idea that I am my own savior, that everything I have is mine, that I. And when we become generous, what happens is this, is those strings of greed that begin to, that have a hold of our stuff, they begin to loosen. When we become generous and we start putting our candy in somebody else's candy pot that has nothing, we begin to loosen those strings of greed. And I don't know where this lands with you, but corporately, I think we have an incredible opportunity in front of us. I love the Be Rich season, and the reason I love Be Rich season is because individually, when we are generous, we can do something. But corporately, when we collectively pool our monies together, we can make a big difference. In fact, that's why we've been leveraging this campaign called Be Rich. Ultimately, it's an extravaganza of generosity. It's an opportunity for us to be uber generous. It's an opportunity for us to look and to think about what can we do with what we have. We don't want to be hoarders. We don't want to just let our stuff start molding. We want to give so that we can be a blessing to other people. And the reason we believe this is to be true is because we absolutely believe that everybody matters to God, whether God matters to them or not. There are people in our community that could care less about God, but when you leverage your resources to help them, it blows them away. There's something you did. Why did you do that? Why were you so generous to me? You didn't have to do that to us. There's this reality. So what did we do as a church? Well, we've got several Intersect partners. Like Andy was mentioning earlier, we've gone out, we've vetted different organizations that are doing the most good in our community. And they are killing it. We've gone with, in the past, we've been able to partner with I Can Still Shine, which is an organization that reaches in and finds women that have been battered and have been abused, whether it's through substance abuse or whether it's domestic abuse. And they reach in and they encourage them, they build them up, and they give them a pathway, a plan to get out of this systemic abuse that they find themselves in. And you have been a huge part of that as you've allowed us to scholarship 7 different girls. Last year, there was 5 girls, and the year before that, there was about 3 or 4, and some of them was overlap. There's been 7 girls that you have helped us scholarship educational grants for them to go and to end this systemic reality of them being abused. For some of you, you've gotten the chance to give generously and help us make a big difference in our community. We've gotten the chance to fund I Can Still Shine. We've gotten the chance to fund Sunshine Kids, as well as we've gotten the chance to go into the Texas Refugee Services of Texas and make major differences with them. This year, one of the things that I really wanted us to do is to find an organization that is doing the most good here in our community. And so I Can Still Shine is doing incredible good. And this year we've added the Keller store, the community storehouse here in Keller. Because one of the things I found with the community storehouse is they are fighting for kids. They're fighting for kids that live in poverty, and they're fighting for kids that are going from weekend to weekend with no food, that are going from spring to fall with no education. And they're saying, what can we do to be a game changer? So when it came to the Intersect partners, we decided, and one of the things with Be Rich is there is an element of giving, of serving, and of loving. And we've decided that with each one of these components, we want to wrap it around I Can Still Shine, and we want to wrap it around the community storehouse, because we've identified that those 2 organizations are doing an incredible good in our community. And so we asked them 2 questions. What would make a big difference to you? If we were to go in and just say, hey, what can we do to make a big difference to you? You would be surprised when we were in the storeroom at Keller at Community Storehouse, and we said, what can we do that would make a big difference for you? They lit up like, oh, are you kidding me? And then she just like word vomited everything. I'm like, hold up a second, time out. Okay, pick one. maybe 2, right? I mean, I wish that we could just come in and be like, okay, check granted, check granted, check granted. I wish we could just go in and be like, more, I mean, Oprah, you get a grant, you get a grant, you get a grant, but we can't do that. But we asked, what can make a big difference to you and what would help you make a big difference? And they were floored. I told them we're a church plant. They're like, that normally doesn't happen. I told them we've been around for a few years, we meet in middle school, yada, 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 and she was just floored that we really want to help. And I said, well, we do. But here's what we're asking. For us to make a big difference, it calls for 100% participation. We're asking for everybody in here today, before you leave, I'm making a hard sell. I'm telling you, I want you to give money today. I want everybody to participate. And the good news is we're taking 100% of the monies that is received today, and we are giving every single penny straight into those organizations. We're taking every penny that you give us, and we're just funneling it in so that we can do collectively the most good. Now, the good news is, if you've been around for a while, we've done this the last few years. And even though inflation tends to be a reality, even though the cost of living continues to go up, we've been able to figure out a way to keep the cost, Be Rich, identical. In fact, it's for a one-time low cost of $39.95. We give 100% away. For a one-time low cost of $39.95, we will make it a reality. Now, $39.95 might be like, are you kidding me? Did you see, you were talking about this idea that I don't feel rich, I've got no margin. $39.95 might be a big step. And for that, I would say anything. 100% participation, even if it's $1, $5, just a couple dollars. Maybe for you, it's not a couple dollars. Maybe you're like, $39.95, are you kidding me? I could absolutely add zeros to that. And for that, I would say, do it, and we'll give it away, right? It's really not, there is no overhead cost. There is nothing that we're keeping today. Everything we are funneling right out into our community. Because for me, I genuinely want to be a part of a church that is a difference maker in our community. I desperately want to be a part of a church where we are seen as individuals that are moving the needle in our community. And so for that, I want to encourage you. I want to challenge you. Whatever it looks like for you, would you consider partnering with us? Would you consider being a part of our Be Rich initiative? And we're going to make it pretty easy. In fact, when we get up to go, we're going to, in the atrium, there's green balloons. So if you have cash or check and you want to give, there's green balloons. You can just go straight to those individuals. If you have a credit card or debit card, this is the one time that we're turning our atrium into a money-changing facility. But it's for good, right? We're not taking any money from it. We're just straight saying, hey, you give, we give. You give, we give. That would be a reality. There's red balloons there that you can just swipe and go. Or you can actually go to berich.org, and you can find ways that you can give today.